Be honest, do you feel like you've been punched in the gut the moment anybody makes even the smallest of criticisms? Then you're probably not just too sensitive. You're probably dealing with rejection sensitive dysphoria. RSD, for short, is something that a lot of ADHDers struggle with. And in today's video, I'm explaining why your doctor may not have mentioned it, what causes it, and how we can cope. Let's get started. If you're new here, I'm Kristen, a fellow ADHDer and creative mindset coach. It's my belief that having a creative mindset is the key to thriving when you're neurodivergent. One of the biggest obstacles to thriving that I've personally dealt with is rejection sensitive dysphoria. It's so much more than just not liking rejection. For ADHDers, this feels like severe emotional pain at the very thought of either failing or being rejected. And here's the thing, we feel that severe pain whether we are experiencing that rejection for real or just perceiving it. The word dysphoria is Greek and it means an overwhelming sense of pain or discomfort. RSD doesn't just feel like a small problem. It feels like we're dying inside, even if all we've actually experienced is a little bit of criticism. I like to think of it as an emotional paper cut. It's far more excruciatingly painful than the injury itself suggests. With that level of severity, you would think that it would be part of the ADHD diagnostic criteria. But it's not, and that is for one reason. It is not an observable behavior. RSD happens entirely in our minds. It was once believed that RSD came from years of trauma, and there is some truth to that. ADHDers experience 20,000 more instances of negative feedback before the age of 10, and that does have a severe impact on how we see ourselves and the world around us. However, research shows that ADHD brains respond to emotional pain in the same way that we respond to physical pain. Most importantly, though, brain scans show that ADHDers have a smaller amygdala. And do you know what the amygdala regulates? Stress, emotions, and fear. Our brains struggle to process the emotions that come with rejection. And we can't distinguish between emotional pain and physical pain. So we feel it just as intensely as if we broke our arm. Suddenly makes a whole lot more sense now, right? That we can be so over the top emotional when we feel like we're not being included. Especially when we add another ADHD challenge, emotional dysregulation. So we don't just struggle to process our emotions, we struggle to regulate them in the first place. Basically, our brains don't have an emotional volume button. So the same thing that doesn't cause much problems for another person is going to be extremely loud for our brains. So much so that an ADHDer's struggle with emotional dysregulation can easily be misdiagnosed as bipolar disorder or borderline personality disorder. But even without all of these brain differences, rejection instinctively feels unsafe. That's because at the end of the day, humans are herd animals, like zebras. The most vulnerable of all members stay in the middle of the herd. Their survival relies on blending in with the black and white stripes of all the other zebras. And when you can't do that, especially as a child, it leaves a mark. This outsidership weighs on us. But when we add the neurodivergence to this lack of belonging, that's when the rejection sensitivity can go full force. We can spend our lives focused entirely on finding ways to belong rather than finding ways for us to thrive. And we assume that once we can figure out how to be normal, we'll thrive, when in reality, the opposite is true. Before I move on to the strategies for dealing with RSD, I need you to understand something. You are not meant to fit in. You are meant to stand out. When you do this, you slowly make your way to the outer perimeter. And it's there that you find all the other outsiders. And honestly, when you are living on the outside, facing out, instead of living on the outside, desperately trying to find a way in, that's when your life starts to get easier. The outer perimeter is where you belong. And it's not because you don't fit, it's because you're actually faster, stronger, smarter than the average member of the herd. You are meant to protect the perimeter. But you can't do that if you're spending all your time trying to fit in to this middle of the herd that is the safest. You either have to be safe or brave. And bravery is the only way to get past these limitations that we put on ourselves that say that we can't fit in and therefore we can't thrive. And if you're one of the brave zebras, tell us your story of overcoming RSD. Your stories help others find their courage, and that makes our community stronger as a whole. Okay, so now we know what rejection sensitive dysphoria is and how it feels, but how does it show up in our lives? The answer is in every conceivable way. It affects our ability to perform at work or in school. It makes relationships more challenging. It looks like replaying the text over and over and over again in your mind. It looks like ruminating on an argument you had 6 months ago and not being able to let it go. It looks like dissecting every single piece of constructive criticism from your boss or your coworkers to the point that it prevents you from doing your job. It prevents you from being honest in your relationships about what you need and what you're struggling with. Every instance of rejection sensitivity compounds onto all your other experiences with rejection. The ADHD brain doesn't process time the way that normal people do. So it all just kind of glues together into one ball of shame and the sense that we are not living up to some impossible standards that we've set for ourselves. This can get so bad that we start to self isolate. When we have a fight with a friend and we lose that friendship, we immediately take the blame, believe that it has something to do with our ADHD, and declare that we are just giving up on friendships or relationships simply to avoid that sense that people are judging us. And when we feel like that, we stop speaking up and asking for feedback. But it's our responsibility to learn to manage those feelings so that we don't stop ourselves from living our best lives. So now I bet you're like, well, great, I need to fix this, but how? How do I make my rejection sensitive dysphoria less dysphoric? And the good news is that there are quite a few strategies to help us with this. The first being just the self awareness, realizing that the experience of RSD doesn't necessarily mean that there's actual rejection happening. And sometimes we can avoid making a situation worse simply by accepting that the way we feel isn't based on reality. It's just how we feel. It may not take away the RSD, but it definitely can soften the blow. Positive self talk makes a huge difference too. And I know that affirmations can feel a bit, I don't know, silly. It feels like lying to yourself isn't going to help the situation, right? You can't just give yourself an affirmation saying that everybody loves you when the evidence to that is non existent and really everyone seems to be mad at you all the time. It's not going to work. You're not going to be able to trick your brain into believing something it doesn't already believe in. But you can do it with baby steps. So instead of looking yourself in the mirror and saying, everybody loves me, when you feel the opposite, look in the mirror and say something like, you don't have to believe everything you think. Experiencing rejection sensitive dysphoria doesn't actually mean that you have to reject yourself at the same time. You can feel those feelings of RSD and be able to say, this situation happened. You don't have to take it that next step further and tell yourself it's because you're a horrible human being or you suck at being in a relationship or this job or whatever it is. Be kind and gentle to yourself. Give yourself grace. I know it sounds silly, and sometimes it feels like that's the worst advice because you want to do better and you can't do better because you need to be in that anxious state to get anything done. But the truth of the matter is that ADHDers, especially, do far better when we're in positive emotion. And if you're bringing yourself down on top of feeling rejected by whatever situation you're in, you're only going to end up performing worse unless you can figure out how to do it with some sort of positive energy. And that's harder to do if you're hating on yourself. And find people that feel the same way. Building a strong supportive system is paramount to us thriving. And I know that this isn't necessarily an easy thing to build. It's going to take time to find the right people and weed out the wrong people. It's really a lifetime of work, not something that happens overnight. But having somebody that can reliably tell you your good and bad qualities without making you feel judged further can be transformational when it comes to rejection sensitivity dysphoria. At the very least, you'll have a shoulder to cry on when it feels like the world is out to get you. And if you don't have friends or a partner to rely on in this way, consider getting extra help, either with a therapist, a coach, or even a support group. Finding people that understand what your challenges are and are willing to help you sort through them can make a huge difference on how quickly you get to those breakthroughs. And lastly, find a creative outlet. ADHDers and autistics take in more information than a neurotypical person. So having a designated time and space to process through this stuff is going to help. Consider having a journaling practice every morning. This can help you organize your thoughts, but it may not be enough. The amygdala, the part of the brain that processes through the stress and emotions, doesn't have language. So processing through complex emotions can work best when it doesn't use words as well. Take up watercolor painting or oil pastels, collage. Don't worry so much about it being representational of you or how you're feeling. Just allow your mind to wander through colors and textures. And do not worry about not being able to produce a masterpiece. The creative process isn't about art. It is about exploration. And when you go into it with that mindset, that's when it's really going to help you sift through your emotional state and find some peace. Right now, you probably are really struggling to see sensitivity as a strength. It's practically impossible to feel that way when you're in the midst of rejection sensitivity dysphoria. However, your sensitivity is a gift, and learning to tap into it without the fear of failure can make a huge difference. It can open you up to a whole range of emotions you've kept hidden. And if you want to learn more about emotional dysregulation, check out the video above. Thanks for watching. I'm Kristen. This is Gratefully Divergent. I make videos every week, so make sure you hit that subscribe button, and I will see you next week. Bye.